Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar tonight. We have Kristina and Kim. I'll let them both kind of introduce themselves a little bit, but we wanted to try to get you guys some motivating information to make you excited to be a physio in Canada. And what better time when we kind of have this bit of a gap right now. We don't have another written exam until March, and we don't have the practical exam till March. So maybe some of you guys are taking a little dip in studying. It's got to gear up pretty soon for a lot of you, but yeah, so I'll pass it over to Kristina, let you introduce yourself, and I'll turn my camera off. I'm going to be here, and I'm going to look up where we will post, or when we will be posting the recording of this. Okay? Pass it off to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Hi, everybody. My name is Kristina Macdonald. I'm the manager of people and culture over at Physio2U. I started with them in June. And prior to that, well, actually, you're going to see, because I'm going to show you my resume. About 20 years experience in leadership, event management, mostly in sport and recreation. I have lost track how many physio appointments I've personally been to myself. I think I've actually logged enough hours as a client that match how many hours you need to become a physio when you're going through the process. So tonight I'm going to go over the career aspect of it and the on paper and share my knowledge. And also I wanted to share that part of what I'm sharing is not only based on me reading other people's resumes and cover letters and what I find effective and what I'm looking for. But it's also, I had the pleasure of working with a career coach in the spring. So I'm also sharing what I learned from her, which you'll kind of see in my examples here as we go through that I actually updated some of my formatting of mine. So I'm going to share my screen and go through the presentation I've prepared. And I'm also going to go through some examples too. So from the top here, so the cover letter, so a lot of notes to take in here. But the main thing is what you see at the top here. So you want to personalize to the company. I can't emphasize that enough. The process I like to do is just starting with reading the job postings literally 3 to 5 times and picking out the key skills or attributes that they're looking for. I mean, as physiotherapists, every company I'm sure is looking for excellent physiotherapists, but if you look through different job descriptions, they're going to mention certain other transferable skills. They're going to mention values that they're looking for, and why do you want the job, and specifically why do you want the job with their company. Then you want to tie it to what do you have to offer, and how will it lead to success for their company. Your cover letter should also tell the story of where you are, wrap up by asking for an interview. You always want to send as a PDF and name the file appropriately. So I'll go through those points and remind again. So I'm gonna go over to my cover letter example now. And you can kind of see some of these points that I'm talking about. So I'm going to do a new share, and this is a cover letter I sent Kim actually. So if you, I guess we haven't introduced Kim yet, but Kim is my boss at Physio2U. So she hired me. So this is a cover letter I sent her. So you notice I've highlighted a lot on here and I've circled a few things. So the highlighting are relevant experience and tying into that job description, specific things. So she was looking for experience in leadership, other relevant skills, so which I mentioned to you. Oh, I guess I added it up when I did my cover letter. I've received over 750 treatments from different practitioners over the years.
I love that. I love that you actually gave a number to that. That's awesome.
I did a calculation over my years of, so I also mentioned I was an athlete. So bringing in, so this is kind of the story of my career, and I do like to kind of summarize in 2 paragraphs. So I've chose the first paragraph here to focus on my sport, my experience with physio, my coaching in sport, which relates to leadership. And then in this green here, this is where I tie it together. So this experience will enable me to optimize the team's performance and achieve client satisfaction. So one tip that one of my managers, like an HR manager at one of my past jobs, gave is you want to close the loop for the people either reading your cover letter or that you're in an interview with. Like don't let them connect the dots and be like, well, you want to do that process for them of how is this experience relevant and what will it mean to my business. You want to connect those dots for your reader or for your interviewer. So again, here the highlighted was looking for a certain level of leadership and experience. So that's what I've brought out here in this yellow. And then again, then I'm linking it together here in the green. Like, why does this matter specifically? And then what I've circled a few words in red here. And this is matching the tone and wordage in the actual job posting. So she was looking for someone with 5 years leadership experience. I have a track record in leadership. They want someone who's passionate, who's supportive. So these are key words in the job description. And then just take a glance at the format here because it is relevant to something I'm going to show next. So I'm just going to jump back over to my presentation here. So I did know Kim prior to me sending that letter. Otherwise, I would not use a first name basis. I would use a formal greeting. And then this is basically the summary of what I just pointed out. Key skills, experience that they're looking for. What are the outcomes? And this may not be listed in the job description. You might have to make that, you might have to kind of figure that out or realizing like what do you want to offer them in terms of outcomes, and then matching the tone. So that's our cover letter. And if there's any questions, maybe from if Kim or Caitlin, if you don't mind, like feel welcome to read those out to me because I'm not really having a chance to glance over to
for sure.
the chat.
Sure.
Here we go. And then, yes, some other important things are make sure you copy edit. Copy edit means that you're editing for grammar and spelling. Do not rely on word programs to catch things for you. And a tip is to read it letter by letter, because when you read a word, things can be out of order and your brain will make sense of it. Another trick is to change colors just so it looks a little different. Sometimes you see it literally differently and catch new mistakes. Have someone read it. And the biggest thing is that this is demonstrating your ability to communicate, which is important in physio, is like, what is your writing ability and ability to communicate? So don't underestimate the cover letter in that regard. So resume. So I asked you to kind of take a mental picture of my cover letter before I shifted. So does anyone notice what is wrong with this picture? Is anyone shouting out in the chat? Maybe someone out there is like, any answers? Thinking it looks different, it's because it does. So the format is what's wrong. So the other one was it just was a simple border around the outside and it was in black and it did not have any blue and it was a different font. So I've done that on purpose to just highlight that you want to keep your formatting the same with your cover letter and resume. So I happened to update my format, but I didn't resend my cover letter. I just resent Kim my resume. So a few things here to highlight, and I'm going to go over this in example, but you can do a skill-based or you can do a chronological or a mixed. So those are two different ways to set up a resume, or the mixed is a combination of both. You want to have a summary statement. I think important for physio is even having education, your memberships and certifications at the top. So I do have an example of that. And then you want to list who you've worked for and then responsibilities and achievements. And again, save as a PDF. And when I say save as a PDF, that tip is for a few reasons. One, it locks in the formatting. So if someone else opens Word, sometimes things can get jumbled. So lock in the formatting by saving as a PDF. And also always title the document with your name, the resume, and I suggest where you have applied. So I will save mine as, for example, Kristina Macdonald, resume, Physio2U, manager of people and culture. Even put the title. And it makes it immensely easier for the person reading and receiving your documents, especially if they're receiving a lot of documents. You're just saving them time rather than if they download it and then the document title is just resume, then they have to open it to figure out whose it is. So little things. So hopefully everyone can see my full resume now. So this profile or summary statement is kind of an overview. So it's kind of like how I introduced myself at the beginning. It should be kind of like your elevator pitch on paper. So I've mentioned a few key skills in here, how many years experience I have in what key areas. And then here I've put in my top skills. And then you can see my resume is a mix. So I have relevant skills, and then I shift into, then I have my education and certifications, and then I shift into my employment experience. I'm going to show a physio example for this education section. And then in my employment experience, this is where you'll notice I did do a description of the organization itself. Then I've included my responsibilities. Then I've listed accomplishments. So I do like this format because it shows what you're responsible for. It also shows your accomplishment or like results driven to list it in that way. And then I'll just scroll through the rest. So work experience, you'll notice I have my contact information on each page. Then I have a section for board, association, community involvement. It also includes sport. So for the person living in London, Ontario, this is when I lived there. When I was, the summer I rode for Canada and then a year training after. And that's bolded for a reason, actually, because I wanted that to stand out of that experience. And then personal interests and references. So you'll notice this is 4 pages long, and you may have heard the old adage that you should keep it to 1 page, you should keep it to 2 pages. And this is a myth that my career coach really debunked, and that the way it's laid out too, I find it's very easy to pick out what information the reader wants. So if the reader can very easily scan this and get a sense of everything I have to offer and then choose whether to read it or not because it's well laid out. So I really do think formatting makes a big difference in readability. Like this is very easily scannable to get the detail, to get an overview, I mean, but if a reader wants the details to be like, well, what did she accomplish in the year or in the 5 years she worked wherever, then they can look at it in more detail. in this relevant skills section, I'm going to shift over to this in a minute. I would also call transferable skills, and I can switch these out depending on where I'm applying. So if I was applying for a marketing job, then I would probably switch out a few of these for like marketing. Or if I was applying for a job in retail, I might choose something that was relevant to retail. So this is where, again, you want to pay attention to the job posting and see what they specifically call out that they're looking for. So I'm going to switch back over to the PowerPoint here. And there we go. So here's the example. I saw this of a recent resume, so I've not included any of their personal information, but I thought this was really brilliantly done, that they had 2 columns at the top. So my resume was pretty much all 1 column, and they just had 1 section that's very clearly 2 columns. I think they might have had lines above and below to capture this in. But it includes the key things that like you want to know right away. Like, when did this person graduate? When did they do their undergrad degree? Oopsie. And what are their memberships and certifications? Or when are their tests coming up? So this person's an interim, they might have a test coming up, and listing that test would be, or test date would be a really good idea as well. Resume, again, copy edit twice, have someone else edit it. It does make a difference. It conveys your communication and attention to detail. So transferable skills are skills that are developed in one situation but can be transferred to another. So on my resume, you might have caught that I had program management, project management, leadership, communication. So some of those are generic or soft skills. So what I recommend you do, and so here's a big list of them. I did put in some here that I felt like were particularly relevant to physio, like client service, communication, relationship building, team player, time management. We at Physio2U, we do list the word organized as one in ours. I looked through a number of different job postings and prep for this, for physio job postings and prep for this presentation. And caring compassion was in all of them. Client service really came out. So what I recommend you do is create a document for yourself with these skills and like build out a list and write it out in the format of situation, action, and result. So here's an example that I've listed here. This is for problem solving. So on opening day of the museum, we were broadcasting nationally on Sports Day in Canada, and there was supposed to be a torch, like an Olympic torch there, and there was a miscommunication of colleagues. I'm not the one who created the problem, by the way. There's a miscommunication of colleagues, and there was not a torch, but I was able to think quick on my feet and find a torch and orchestrate it coming like literally just in time for the broadcast. So it was a very high stress situation that I was able to think on my feet, communicate with my colleagues, and act very quickly. And it resulted in us pulling it off essentially. So this is how like I have a transferable skills document with like 20 different skills and about 2 examples of each. And I did tighten it up for my resume, which you may have noticed. I think we have a raised hand. I welcome any questions if one of my co-presenters would mind reading it out.
Yeah, the person is just asking a question that I think would probably be best for the Q&A time.
Oh, okay,
it's
perfect.
Not totally relevant to what you're talking about, so yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I will just carry on then, and we're almost at Q&A actually. So for the resume, tighten it up, summarize or aggregate your point. But the point of writing out a full list is one, so you can interchange, but also very much so to prepare for your interview. And it's not a bad thing at all to bring that list with you to an interview. It shows you're prepared. And I also just want to note that these transferable skills can come from your career or personal life. So like, for example, I sit on my strata council, or I volunteered in sport. They can come from other situations. And that's where, like, maybe during university, you worked somewhere where customer service was relevant, and maybe you obtained client service or customer service training. That is very much transferable skill, highly relevant to physio, which just makes you look stronger and brings you as a whole person to the job. So I'm just going to quickly flash up that that there's always I just want to say there's always an open-ended question in interviews. So just this is more focused on the paper things, but what is up here is very relevant. And in interviews, you always need those examples of situation, action, result, which is why I recommend getting them all down on paper in a separate document from your resume. And then you can tighten them up to include on your resume, but also have the full example for an interview. And that is all from me. So I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, I can feed you some questions here. So Solani is asking, how does like a new physio write a resume when they really don't have a lot of experiences to add?
That's a great question. I think that what I've been seeing from student physios coming forward is their clinical placements. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you definitely want to include those. And similar to how I highlighted in the resume of making it clear, like when I mentioned, like, describe the organization, you can describe like what was the program. So instead of just writing like Burnaby Hospital or like your actual employer title, I would write a descriptive line about the program, like so it's more clear, like there's a descriptor of the program or the setting you worked in. Mm-hmm. And then you could give some examples of different patients or cases that you worked with. Yeah, so I would just build out each of those clinical examples for sure. And then if you do feel like you have other relevant employment experience, include those. And to be honest, like, having a skills section will lengthen out your resume a little bit. It'll make it robust. So that transferable skills section, I think, would make you stand out compared to people who don't include that section of like problem solving, organization, any of those transferable skills. I would recommend doing those things.
Mm-hmm. I think I'd add to that too. One of the things that I always encourage students to do, and you kind of touched on this, is writing in that you have, or like if you have passed your written and your practical exams pending, put that in. And definitely, like, if you passed your written on your first attempt, put that in. That's great information to know. And especially if you know when your practical date's going to be, put that in. Some clinicians are a little nervous to hire interns, especially if there's like, okay, I don't know if they passed on their second or third attempt, and I don't know if they're planning to do their practical like 6 months from now or a year from now. So definitely include this. And one other thing I would include is if you are taking a prep course. Obviously, I'm biased. It's always good to do that. But I think it shows a level of commitment to how bad you want to pass too. And I always tell students that put in your prep course, put it if it was for the written, if you're doing written and practical, put both those in. It shows that to your employer, potential employer, that you're committed to getting through this and working and learning. So that's another nice thing to add.
I agree. I also saw in a recent resume, they listed conferences attended. So that to me shows that they're a keen learner. Yeah. If they've like went and done other learning that they didn't have to do. And also volunteer experience, like having a volunteer experience section would be valuable.
Yeah. Okay, so we have lots of questions coming in. So Megan is asking, is it all right to mention your placement experiences in lieu of employment? I think you answered that, so that's good. You definitely want to. Layla is asking, how would you look at a candidate who is internationally educated but doesn't have Canadian experience due to COVID?
That was, how do they highlight
I think this would probably be a question maybe for like someone who is hiring them. So, you know, how would you look at that, or maybe how could you put a positive spin to that in your resume?
I see. Yeah, that's a good question. I think actually a lot of people out there in the COVID world are facing breaks in employment or whatnot. So you definitely want to highlight your international experience. And as I would have said before, like I would format it that way and definitely bring all that out. And then I would say, like, what are you doing in the meantime? Like if you have been, taking the exam prep course, if you've been maybe doing if you've been doing any research or any information interviews, or if you've been volunteering in the meantime. I think it's also quite understandable if you've decided to do other work in the meantime, because I think everyone understands like you have to make a living. And that's something you can highlight in your cover letter. So if you like moved here in February and you were set to do your exams at certain times and they got delayed, that is kind of where you have an opportunity to tell your story or explain to in an interview situation, I feel like. Kim, did you have a point from the last question?
Oh, well, I'll just add to that too. If you are educated abroad, sometimes it's helpful to have one sentence describing the university or the institution that you got your training. As Canadians, we're super familiar with all the university programs in Canada, but if it's an international one, you might want to say perhaps how big the program was, whether it's a teaching hospital, whether the university is affiliated with a teaching hospital, just like a one sentence to describe the institution or the place of work is valuable, is helpful. And I wanted to expand on just one of the answers that I had put in the chat box. So somebody asked, is it okay for a resume to be over 2 pages? And I said yes, and especially if the information is relevant. So I have received long resumes where every course was listed and every publication was listed. I personally believe that's fine to include. I think it shows how committed the person is to continuous growth and learning, and perhaps how what areas of interest they have. If the publications are all specific to an area of research or an area of physiotherapy, it's nice to know what their special interests are. And I did say I've also received resumes where past jobs such as serving at a restaurant or retail sales was listed, not so relevant for a physiotherapist job application or resume. From what Kristina talked about transferable skills, if you need to round out your resume, then I believe it is okay to show other experience, but you should have a sentence or two explaining those transferable skills. So perhaps if you worked in a retail sales job, you might have had some customer service training, and customer service training as a physiotherapist is hugely relevant. So just pulling out how your past jobs or perhaps current jobs give you transfer to being a great physiotherapist.
Yeah, and I see there's just another question, and sorry if this was the question actually before, but just in terms of making international work experience relevant to Canadian employers, I think depending on where you're from, it might just also be helpful to try to put it in language that is relevant to the terms we use here. So when Kim is about to do her presentation, her portion of things, it may just not translate the same exactly from depending on where you are in the world, perhaps. So that's another kind of tip I would say, is try to use the verbiage and language of how things are described here and change it, like do that for the reader rather than the reader having to figure it out.
Another nice thing to do if you are like Kristina was saying, maybe you've been here since February, you haven't been able to do your exams. Talk about what you have been doing. And I definitely know a lot of people have been making Instagram pages and doing a lot of education through that. I know someone else who started doing a blog. Those things are great to put in your resume, to let them know that you are like in the content, you're trying to spread it around, you're, trying to get it out to the community. That's great for a clinic. Like at the end of the day, if you're applying for a private company, they need you to get full. They need you to have patience. So if they can see that you are already strong at building a network, building connections, that's money in their pocket. So definitely put that in your resume as well.
It also shows your personality. And at the end of the day, you want to work with people you like and enjoy spending time with too. Like there's that fit aspect. So yeah, don't be shy to like show off who you are and like what your interests and whatnot are.
Mete has a question. There's a little bubble beside it. It says answer live. I'm going to press it. I don't know what's going to happen when I press it. Oh, okay. That's it. It just says you'd like to answer this question live. So this is a nice question. So how do you nicely present in your resume? You have been a stay-at-home mom for 4 years, but still have 7 years of experience before moving to Canada, which I feel like a lot of people could relate to this in some way.
Yeah, I think that being a mom is a ton of work. It's one of the hardest jobs out there. So, and you've also been through childbirth. So I feel like that's something that if I saw that listed, like if it was like listed as a job or if it was said in the summary experience, then like I think it's way better to put that that's the reason why you haven't been practicing versus leaving it blank. Like you definitely want to fill out that part of the story for sure. And I think the fact that you're here is really great. I think it may be a concern, maybe like Kim could answer this better, but like how sharp are your skills if you haven't been practicing for the last 4 years? That might come up as a thought or a question. So if you've done something like this or whatever education you've done on your way to returning back to working in physio, I think would be really relevant.
A little bit of an unpopular thing to say potentially, or controversial thing to say, I guess. There is a positive to the fact that you've had your kids already, and you won't be leaving. So unfortunately, we do live in a world where it is tough. If you are going to have children and you plan to leave for a year after each of those children, that's a gap in clinics' ability to make money. And I would guess that no one would admit this, but it is something to think about. If you're a female looking for a job and you're like at that childbearing age, they're going to think, well, if I could hire someone who isn't going to leave me for 3 years and I have to find a locum and I can't even find a locum, it might be nice to say, I'm a mom, I'm done having kids and I'm ready to work, right? Yeah.
The realities.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I think we have 2 more questions and then, we have lots of questions. Okay, maybe we'll just kind of pick like 3 more and then go for it. So if an employer is asking for excellent verbal written communication and I feel that I am competent but don't have excellent skills, should I apply or how should I manage that situation?
Oh, absolutely. I think that one thing, this is an anonymous attendee, so I don't know if this is a female or a male asking this question, but statistically, I have read and in my experience kind of seen this, that women will feel like they need to have like every single bullet point of a job like nailed before applying. And men might be like, I have 2 of these, I can apply. So I'm just throwing that out there to be aware for particularly the females to be aware that that is a thing that we do as women, apparently. But absolutely, like if you feel like you're competent, yeah, definitely apply. This also shows like you're competent and you want to improve. So absolutely, like do the best you can. And see where you get, and you can always highlight areas that you want to improve. By the way, your question is very well formatted, so you're indicating you're right there that you're a good communicator. Yeah, so absolutely, I think it's natural to not feel like you're strong in every single thing that someone's looking for.
Okay, last question, then we're going to move on. If we didn't answer your question after Kim goes, maybe just ask it again. Okay, I'm going to pick this one from Harneet because I get this type of question a lot. So I'm going to kind of reword it a little bit, but how do you describe if you have academic experience, like being a professor? We have a ton of students who come to us and they are the head of their university. Like they're not a student, they're done. Like they have been leading the physio program at their university, and yet they can't get a job in Canada, or they're finding it hard to get a job in Canada. So how do you word that so that you look appetizing?
It's a great question. I think it's really impressive. If you've been teaching other people, I assume that you have a high level of knowledge, great communication skills, and you're proficient at what you do. So I would definitely make that clear in your resume that you've been an assistant professor, like you've been teaching. I would use those words and maybe even describe the courses you've been teaching, so it's clear what you've been doing. I think maybe a challenge would be, and I'd be interested in Kim's thoughts, that if you've only been teaching, then how do the practical skills look? Like that would be my question. If you've only been teaching, you might have a very excellent knowledge base, and then how do the practical skills look? So I would want to see where those skills are too. So I would definitely have all of them listed, the practical as well as the academic skills listed.
So maybe that's a good segue. Maybe Kim, you can touch on that and then take it from there.
Sure. So my name is Kim Hall. I've been a physiotherapist for over 15 years. I trained at Queen's University in Ontario, and I have worked in public and private and the in-home setting. So I feel I am well versed to be able to discuss this subject of the different areas of practice, the pros and cons of them for working in BC or working in Canada. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So we had discussed how terminology may be different in different countries, sometimes perhaps even in different provinces. So in Canada, we typically use the term public practice, which means publicly funded healthcare by the government. So sites that include public practice are hospitals or acute care, which is also called inpatients. Then we have hospital outpatient sites, which would include things such as a hand clinic, an orthopedic clinic, which is usually post-op surgeries for joint replacements or hip fractures, broken bones. There's also condition-specific clinics for stroke or cardiac rehab, people with arthritis, particularly rheumatoid arthritis or juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And then there may also be condition-specific programs. So within the Vancouver Coastal Health Authority, we have a program called OASIS. It stands for Osteoarthritis Service Integration System. So there are a lot of condition-specific programs that include public practice jobs. Other public practice jobs would include health authority administration, so basically office work, doing things that are not related specifically to physiotherapy, but are related to healthcare and management and leadership. There's long-term care homes, so that's for the frail elderly people who typically have dementia or other chronic diseases which limit their mobility, and they require long-term care, which has got 24/7 nursing. There's also child development centers, as well as physios that work in schools, and all of these jobs are considered public practice or part of the government. Private practice mainly includes clinics. There may also be worker injury case management. In British Columbia, the main company for that is WorkSafe BC. That could arguably also be considered a government organization, but the pay and the benefits to be a WorkSafe BC case manager is much higher than what public practice would typically pay. And there's also ergonomic consulting work. In the in-home setting, it's also commonly known as community practice, and in-home jobs for physiotherapy may be public or private. And conditions commonly treated in the in-home setting are ones where people are having difficulty getting outside of the house in order to go to a clinic. So it might include people early in their post-operative stages, stroke, frail elderly that don't drive anymore or have difficulty getting onto buses, or at this stage in the pandemic wouldn't want to take a bus or take a taxi. And also people with chronic disability, particularly multiple sclerosis and cerebral palsy, or any condition where they're wheelchair bound. There are many pros as well as many cons to working in public practice. And like I said before, I did work in public practice for over 7 years. So I do feel this breakdown is fair. In public practice, some of the benefits of working there, or some of the pros, are that you do get guaranteed hours and guaranteed pay. So for example, during the pandemic, there were lots of hours still being worked by hospital physiotherapists, whereas clinics, a lot of people lost hours. Other pros are you would get extended benefits for yourself and family members. There's paid sick time, paid vacation time. There's a small pension. There's disability insurance provided. Your malpractice insurance to practice as a physiotherapist is covered. And you can work with and learn from a multidisciplinary team. So I established my career at Vancouver Coastal Health, and I got to work alongside pharmacists and diagnostic imaging techs, surgeons, doctors, nurses, social workers, OTs, SLPs, and I learned a lot. So there is benefit to working with that multidisciplinary care team. You also will treat a wide variety of conditions working in a hospital setting and see lots of rare things that you might never see in a clinic. Cons include the full-time commitment with usually zero flexibility of hours. The earning potential in British Columbia is about 50 to 60% of what's possible in private practice. I know in Ontario, wages are much higher in public practice compared to BC. So depending what province you're in, you may be able to earn, the wage split would not be that different. But in BC, it's basically 50 to 60%. When you work in public practice, you are part of a union. So union dues get removed every paycheck, and it's not optional. They're mandatory union dues. Right now, the Health Services Association, which is the union in British Columbia for physiotherapists working in public practice, it's 1.85% of your earnings. If your union goes on strike, you will not be able to work, and typically there's no pay. Sometimes there are, later on, there might be some compensation. And another con is if another union goes on strike, you may have to cross a picket line. Fortunately, in BC, there hasn't been too many healthcare strikes in recent years, and there hasn't been violence at picket lines, but historically, there has been violence when people try and cross picket lines. Other cons are you don't get to pick vacation days. You have to submit your vacation requests once a year, and the vacation is granted based on seniority. So if you're new to the health authority or new to that hospital, you will likely not get the vacation that you want, particularly if it's going to be around summer or Christmas or spring break. Okay. There's also an earning cap based on a union wage grid. And another con is sorry, have to pay for malpractice insurance. That's not public-private. That's a con of private. For private practice, the pros are high earning potential. And if you're working as an independent contractor, there's a long list of tax write-offs, which would reduce the amount of tax you owe and just give you more money in your pocket at the end of the day. Typically, there's more schedule flexibility. And in general, the clients or the patients that you will deal with are less acutely ill. And so you are able to build rapport and establish a long-term relationship with your patients or with your clients. In hospital, they can be very, very sick. They might not remember you. You'd work with them for a short period of time and then they're out of there and you won't see them again. Cons of private practice are if you're working as an independent contractor, there are no benefits or pension, and there's no paid sick or holiday time. You can work as an employee within private practice clinics, and some of those things may be included or could be negotiated. Another con would be mentorship and learning may be limited. You need to make sure there's a strong mentorship program in place at the clinic you choose to work at. And you would have to pay separately for malpractice insurance. It typically runs around $300 to $600 a year, depending on how much insurance you get covered for and what province you're in. In Canada, there are many potential tax write-offs for physiotherapists working as independent contractors. So some of them include college registration fees, professional association membership fees. In BC, it's the Physiotherapy Association of British Columbia. If you are having to purchase your malpractice insurance and or your commercial general liability insurance, those are tax write-offs. You'd also be able to write off a percentage of mobile phone monthly bill or purchase of a new mobile phone. You'd have potential home office expenses that you can expense, and home office supplies, course or conference registration fees, professional organizational memberships, vehicle expenses for business use, 50% of meals or entertainment related to work, legal fees associated with your physical therapy work, and accountant fees. So just as a disclaimer, always make sure with an accountant for a complete list of expenses based on your personal situation. Tax write-offs basically reduce the claimed income that you owe tax on to the government. So say if a physiotherapist earns $100,000 in a year for all the private practice work they do, then they maybe spent $10,000 on all of these expenses you see here. They're only going to pay tax on $90,000 of that income instead of $100,000. And we do have a list of this. So if you would like to be emailed this list, then feel free to email Kristina. people@physio2u.ca is Kristina's email address, and she can send it to you.
And I'll send, and like just like we do in most of our webinars, I'll send a webinar takeaway email, and I'll put both of their information in there so you guys can have it as well.
Thanks, Caitlin. Pros and cons for in-home physiotherapy. So the pros would include effective functional-based rehabilitation, since assessing and treating you're assessing and treating patients in their everyday setting. So it is really nice to be able to prescribe exercises and assess them in the actual setting that they need to live their day-to-day lives. With in-home care, we are able to build relationships really well. Whenever I walk into somebody's home, I'm seeing pictures of grandchildren or maybe war veteran awards, memorabilia. So it's easy to start conversations and build rapport and long-term relationships when you work in somebody's home and their intimate environment. We also in-home treat a wide variety of conditions, and there's a lot of flexibility, both for public and private jobs, I'm aware of, for people's personal schedules, just fitting in picking kids up from school or buying groceries in between seeing patients. I know that happens for both public as well as private physios working in the community settings. Some cons would be there is more autonomy and independence, so you need to be really confident with your treatment skills. Sometimes organizing the caseload or case management can be a little tricky as well, because you have to slot in driving time in between homes, as well as accommodate for traffic and times of the day. So I did want to invite people to subscribe to one of our newsletters. If you are interested, you can sign up by emailing Kristina or heading over to our careers page. And then I did want to invite people to follow us, Physio2U, on these different social media platforms. And I'm active on Instagram at Kim Physio. So you're welcome to follow me there.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much, Kim. We've got lots of questions for you.
Okay.
That was awesome. So one of the questions that I think is great to chat about is, are some areas of practice more likely to hire interim physios?
I'd say no. In British Columbia, we have such a shortage of physiotherapists. Any setting will hire an interim if they believe they can, if the interim has the right attitude towards learning and are showing commitment to learning the skills they would need to have in that setting, and as well as being like a team player and willing to invest in themselves in the organization. Any setting will hire an interim.
I can speak to the East Coast a little bit. So I know in the West Coast, there tends to be like there's usually a lot of openings in public, and then it's a little bit harder potentially to find a job in private, or just maybe a little bit more competitive. In the East Coast, it's actually switched. So this was very new information for me, but it's really easy to find a job in private practice, but it's really difficult to find a job in public practice in the East Coast. So something to think about, if you know that your skill set, or you know your heart is working in public or home, home's kind of cool because there's different options. You could do it either public or private, right? But definitely if that's kind of where your heart is, come to the West Coast. There's lots of opportunities there. I always try to convince people to come to the West Coast. Like, it's beautiful here pretty much all year round. So for those of you who have like snow on the ground right now, you better rethink where you're living. Okay, so some more questions. Where do you recommend starting out early in your career?
I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't started my career in the hospital system. So I do find working in public practice is a really great way to consolidate your skills, particularly if you're working at a hospital where you are rotating from ward to ward. Committing right away to like a burns unit or just a single unit, you might not get the same variety and ability to consolidate your skills. You have to be prepared to work hard. Like, working in the hospital is hard work. You're working around death and dying and sick and stressed out people. So it's not for everyone. But I really learned a lot working in public practice. I also took advantage of it. I asked, like, can I observe this surgery? Can I come with you into the OR on this morning? And it wasn't paid time, right? I was showing up at work at 7 a.m. to be in the OR for an extra hour and a half in the morning before I started my rounds on the ward. I was working more than 40 hours and not being paid for it when I worked in the hospital.
I will say this comment is coming from a student who I know will be absolutely fabulous in any place that she decides to work, and anywhere that decides to hire her would be very lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to work with her at my clinic. So I think another kind of piece of advice would be just really follow your heart. Like I knew for me, public, I didn't want it. Like Kim said, I can't do death, dying, sick. Nope. That's not why I went into physio. And I struggled through my placements in those type of environments too. So I knew I didn't want to do that. And at that time, the culture for physio, at least for new grads when I was graduating, was like you went to public, and then when you were done public for a year or two, then you went into private. It's changing a little bit more. People are definitely going into private right out of school, and I wouldn't be afraid of it. I got really lucky, and like Kim said too, like I had to work my butt off to try to find people who would mentor me and, encourage me and help me really hone in on these skills that I had. So don't be afraid to work at something like Physio2U if you are new, because you'll find people who give a crap about learning and they'll teach you. And if you're passionate, you will attract those type of people and you will learn. So if you're someone like Lindy who asked that question, you're going to be a rock star wherever you go. So just pick what you're passionate about and it'll happen for you.
And make sure if you are going to work at a private clinic, make sure they have a really well-structured mentorship program.
And ask for it, like ask to see it. And Kim and I know this, like there are so many people out there like, we have a great mentorship program. And then you just flop and you have nothing.
Mm-hmm. I worked in a private practice clinic 3 days a week for almost 2 years. And I was promised all sorts of mentorship and I didn't get it. And I was even like, okay, I was scheduling the owner of the clinic to sit down with me at 7 p.m. I was going to buy pizza and she was going to go over all my questions and maybe teach me how to make a splint. And over and over and over again, she would cancel on me the day of. Mm-hmm. And it was super frustrating. Mm-hmm. And ultimately she lost me. Like I didn't stay working there because I wasn't learning. It wasn't quality mentorship that I had been promised.
Mm-hmm. And ask, like one of the things I would ask right now, the clinical exam we know is virtual, so maybe you don't need practice space as much, but that's something really important to ask is like, I'm a new physio or I'm doing my exams. Do you have any new grads who are willing to take me under their wing? Do you allow me to come in after hours and practice my skills? Can I have a key to the clinic so I can come bring someone in and practice here? Like those are all extensions of that mentorship, right? Just being flexible to what you need. Mm-hmm. Okay. There's so many questions. Oh my goodness. How do patient expectations differ in public and private practice, given that patients in private pay more out of pocket?
Yeah, so I would say that the expectations in private are higher, but the biggest difference actually is going to be the motivation level. So in my personal experience, the success rate I get from my private clients, my private pay clients, is much higher than the ones that are being funded by the government or being funded by a third party and they don't have to pay a dime. So in one way, it can be really, really rewarding to work with people who are invested in their health and wellness. Yes, they want results, but they are also committed to working with you in order to get the results. I did not have that same experience working in public, particularly outpatient clinics. The number of times people would cancel or just not be compliant with the recommendations I was making for them or the exercises. It was really frustrating.
It drains you as a physio. You're like, I put in all this work. I researched this condition. I asked my colleagues to practice this skill, and then you don't show up or you don't care. Like that sucks your soul as a physio. That's tough.
So yes, there is a higher expectation from the private clients, but at the same time, you're going to get better results from them typically because they are so motivated to get better because they are investing their time and their money.
Okay. Do you have any advice on optimizing the amount of mentorship available, or is it better to find something structured early on?
Find it structured early on.
Yeah, for sure. People will promise you the world. See it in writing. And if they have a new grad-ish that's like worked within maybe the last year, ask if you can talk to them, see what their experience was like, right? that's so huge to have a recommendation. See if they've had a lot of turnover too. Like, do they have new grads who are now 5-6 year old, like into the profession, and they still work there? That's a good sign too, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some good websites in Canada to look for physio jobs?
In BC, it is the Physiotherapy Association of BC. So probably in Canada, you just have to figure out which province you want and then go to the professional association for that province. Alberta, the college and the professional association are together, but in British Columbia, that's going to be your go-to site is the Physiotherapy Association of BC website, bcphysio.org. And in other provinces, I would recommend going straight to the professional association's website.
I will add, and I only will say this if you're one of our students, because I can get sometimes overwhelmed, but if you are one of our students, send me your resume. I like to add more on my plate and look at resumes and send them to people that I think would be a good fit. So we have like locations all across Canada, right? So we like lots of those clinics are looking for people. We have tons of clinics that reach out to us asking if we have anyone who we think was, good in one of our courses and they want to fill a spot. So if you are one of our students and we know a little bit about you, then definitely reach out to me and let me know if you're looking for somewhere. I have a lot more connections, definitely in BC, because that's where I am. But other places a little bit too. Okay. Is it difficult for intern physios to get a job in public practice? As there is no work, not sure what that says, but is it difficult?
No, they were, so as of March, there was like 50 job openings, I think, in public practice, and they mostly got filled up because a lot of private physios working in clinics decided to take those jobs because it was the guaranteed hours, guaranteed pay. And I know for a fact that Vancouver Coastal Health has hired a lot of interns as well as Providence. So interns can definitely work in public practice at hospitals.
Huge. And that's another good connection that we have, at least in BC. If you guys are looking to work in public, I can connect you with the recruiter for each of the health associations, I guess. So let me know if you're looking for that. Okay. How to approach a supervisor to show our skills after clearing a written component to apply for a resident job? Kind of a tough question.
So showing the supervisor or showing the owner?
I think it'd be the
hiring you.
Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Yes. So for Physio2U, like our interview process, we ask quite a few detailed clinical questions. And over the years, I've been able to hone them down that I don't actually watch somebody practice. I just ask these clinical questions, and it's usually pretty indicative to their skills and abilities when they are with a patient or with a client.
Can you put that in a little snippet and send it to the CAPR? That'd be really great, that you can know if someone is a good clinician by asking a few questions. Yes,
I have told them that. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what the context would be. Like, I guess if you weren't offered an interview, or maybe send a video, like to me, getting a video of your experience, or even just a video showing your enthusiasm to work at that organization that's like 1 minute long would go a long way.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's awesome. Especially for people who do get, like, if you're applying for a clinic, or, like, I know if someone would apply to the clinic that I'm at, applying for Physio2U, like, we get a lot of resumes. So you do need to stick out, right? You can go and get a job at a clinic who doesn't offer any mentorship, and they'll probably snap you up right away. But if you want somewhere good, you got to stand out. And if I were to get like a great video like that, I would love that. I always tell people too, to like do their resume on Canva. I don't know, Kristina, what your thoughts are on this, but
I've seen some cool ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I love personally, like when someone puts a picture of themselves in a resume, and I know there's debate about that too, but when someone puts a picture in, lets me know a little bit about their personality through like a designed resume. I love that. I geek out over that for sure.
And also, if you are doing a Zoom interview, still prepare in a professional way for the interview. So still make sure you look professional, that your hair is kept, that you don't have like a messy, unmade bed with clothes all over it in the background. We've had that. It's not, it's not good. So make sure, even in a Zoom interview, that you are doing your best to be professional.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Okay, let's see. What are things to be looked in? What are things to be looked for in a good mentorship program?
Time, like hours of time, a progression of conditions, or a progression of like you'll be shadowing the 2 initial assessments, and then the supervisor is going to shadow you for 2 initial assessments, then you're on your own.
Like how often you're going to talk on the phone, or how often your mentor is going to review your chart notes. Might be some other specifics you put in there.
I love to get the intern or the physio, whatever I'm hiring. I like to work with them and find out what their goals are. And so that's a big part of our mentorship program, is to say, okay, like, what do you want? And one of the things that we always get people say is like, I want a full caseload. So one of the big aspects of our mentorship program is, what is a full caseload to you? For some people, a full caseload is like 1 opening in a day. For other people, it's like, I'm full 3 weeks in advance. And getting on the same page with someone about that, because some clinics don't want a 3-week wait list. Some people want to be able to get it, like they want you to be able to get in that week with them. So for our mentorship program, it's a lot about getting on the same page about what your goals are and what my goals are as your mentor.
Another thing too that we're experiencing is just be clear about who will be your mentor or supervisor if you're an intern. Because for example, like Kim and I have done the interviewing, but then the person was placed with a different supervisor. So then you could hopefully the clinic would want to set you up for like an information interview, or like shadowing ahead of time with that person, so you know who's actually you're going to be working with before you sign the paperwork. But that's what I would recommend too, is make sure like you've had some interaction with the person who will be your supervisor.
Another thing you could ask too, and we do this with all of our potential hires, is we meet now we're meeting every 2 weeks for 1 hour. It's in the middle of the week. It's Wednesday from 1 till 2. So everyone has to take a break from seeing patients to do this 1 hour of, we kind of rotate through different topics. And I always bring a potential hire into that meeting. So everyone gets to meet you. You get to meet everyone. You get to see what that mentorship kind of is like. So that's, I'd say, a nice thing is if they do say, well, we have meetings, this and this and this, say like, can I attend? Like, I'll be quiet, but can I attend? And see if you fit in, right? Okay. Do you have to be signed up for the next practical exam in order to work as a resident physio in BC? I don't know the answer to this, so.
I believe yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would venture to guess too that you have to show that it's within a reasonable amount of time. And with the practical exam, it's only offered twice a year, or there'll be more this year. So you had to be going for, pretty much the next one.
It was a loophole that they changed, that the college bylaws, like the college changed the rule on that, because they did have people who passed the written and then they were working as an interim for years.
Yes, there's a 15-month limit, and it's a hard limit. Like I have seen students who are like a month or 2 away, they have a full caseload, their exam's almost there, and they lose their license. Okay, for the sake of time, it's 8:40. Maybe we'll do 2 more questions. Is that okay? Okay, I'm gonna pick them randomly because I see too many people I recognize and I don't want to hurt people's feelings. Okay, this is kind of maybe a question for both of us. So how do we recommend dividing our time between working and studying? So I can talk to the studying piece if you want, but you can kind of chat to the working.
I think it's really important to study while you're working. So you might come across a new condition, or you might see somebody post-op and you did some nerve conduction testing and realized like there's some pathology there, but you don't remember exactly what nerve it is. Well, you better look up and see exactly what that nerve distribution is and where the nerve roots are and what the actual innervations are. I also think it's really important to be asking for consent. And so you might be talking extra because you're learning, you're practicing the consent and checking for safety. So I think you should be actually practicing, preparing for the practical exam while you are working. And then at the end of each day, I would recommend setting aside a half-hour minimum, if not longer, for looking all those things up that you weren't sure of, or something new came up. I don't see it being like effective to like spend 4 hours on a Sunday like studying for the practical. I think it's much more valuable for you to be working and practicing on a daily basis, or 5 days a week, all of those assessment and treatment that would be typical in a practical exam.
Okay, so my opinion's a little different, but sorry. I totally understand that. And I definitely agree with the fact that working is going to give you just a different intensity, right? You're walking in, you're seeing a new patient, you're just learning what your idiosyncrasies are. If you realize that you get really nervous when you first meet a patient, you have to deal with that because that'll happen on the exam. If you realize that you have a problem explaining educational pieces to them, but your hands-on skills are strong, that's good information. So you'll learn a lot about yourself through practice, which I think is great. The unfortunate thing is that the clinical exam, from our experience, doesn't transfer a lot to what you do in day-to-day practice. Especially if you are going into private. I mean, the proper way to do a lumbar spine scan, I would venture that like 99% of private practice physios out there don't do that. And you just don't have time. If you have a half an hour initial assessment or 45 initial assessment, it's pretty hard to get that all in. So I think my big thing that I tell students to do is you have to study your frameworks to get through the practical exam. There's a step-by-step formulated approach for every major station out there. Is that what you're going to do working clinically? Probably not, but that's okay. It'll allow you to, again, find what you're good at, find what you need to go home and work at. I always recommend for students to do like 2 days of self-study, memorizing frameworks, getting really good at that. And then 2-3 days of practice, like get with your partner. The exam's going to be virtual. So now maybe you're meeting virtually online with that partner to study. But the flip side to that too, is that a lot of people need to make money and you need to support yourself during that time. So positives to working is that you're going to make an income, you're going to learn about yourself. You can kind of figure out things that you need to work on to be able to pass the exam. But at the end of the day, if you don't have time, if you did the written in March and you're doing the practical in June, there's not a lot of time to work. So you have to weigh out all those options, if that makes sense. Okay. One more question. Okay, this is a fun one. If a person is looking to run their own clinic in the future, what would be your advice for them as they start their career in BC? This is a great question for Kim.
Yes, I've been asked that question before. I see you need to have at least 3 to 5 years of clinical experience to consolidate your knowledge and be a really good physiotherapist. There are people who start businesses sooner than that, and then pretty soon they're only doing a day or two a week of physiotherapy, and then 3 or 4 days a week of managing HR, finance, meeting with lawyers, meeting with accountants, and they never really fully develop their physiotherapy skills. So in my personal opinion, I think it's really, really important that you consolidate everything you've learned and work in different settings, perhaps with different conditions, for 3 to 5 years before you start a business.
And find someone that you're like, ooh, I want to be like that clinic owner, and then go work with them and learn from them. Like, spend your time getting your clinical skills, but also learn from what they're doing, learn from the mistakes of what they're doing too, right? Find out what you're like, ooh, if I own a clinic, I'm not doing this. It's like, as a parent, right? You see other parents and you're like, oh, I will not do that with my kid. And you do, but it's like a great opportunity to just learn from what they do good and what they don't. So who asked that? Pratik? Go work with Kim, learn from her. There you go. Okay, so I'm sure I missed a lot of questions, so I apologize. I have Kristina and Kim's information. I will send it in the webinar takeaway email. And then I will have this video edited. It's a long one. It's like an hour and 15 minutes, or hour and it's a while. Yeah, hour and 15 minutes. I will have it up on YouTube December 3rd. So not this Thursday, but next Thursday. Okay. So Kim and Kristina, thank you so much for meeting with everyone. It's pretty impressive. We've only really lost a few people in that whole time. Everyone stayed till the end. So that's great. So go to bed, Kim. It's late for you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, no, it was great. Okay, we'll have to pick another topic that people find interesting. Maybe that's something I could put in the webinar takeaway email too. If there's a topic that you would love to learn from Kim and Kristina, let us know, and maybe we can set up another one of these in a few months. Okay.
Yeah, sounds
good. Thanks everyone for attending.
Bye everyone.